Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Hello, beautiful.
So in 1981, Alvin Schwartz published Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. They lasted for about 10 years till about 1991, and they consisted of about 3 different entries in this anthology. The stories themselves were very, very creepy, but what everybody remembers about these books is the images. The images that came associated with this anthology were creepy beyond belief. And the reason it was creepy beyond belief is because these stories were dedicated for young readers, adolescent readers between the ages of 8 and 15. I remember reading it when I was about that age, and I always told myself, should I be reading this? Should I be, looking at these images? Will I have nightmares? And I was on the cusp a lot of times. And the same thing is definitely with this movie. Produced by Guillermo del Toro and directed by, I do believe, Andre Verdal. He also did The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And that is a indie horror film itself. Definitely check that out. The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And of course, with Del Toro producing, I was ecstatic because we have a Scary Stories movie with Del Toro's name associated with this. So I was pumped going into the theater. So the movie is basically kind of like Stand By Me when it comes to the narrative that holds the movie together. It's kind of like a loser's club of kids, young kids, that stumble upon a haunted house that was owned by the Bello family back in the 1800s. And when they're in this house, of course, they go through all the hallways and unlock all the locks and go through all the corridors, and they finally get to Sarah Bello's room where she wrote these scary stories when she was young and locked up. And the Bello family are said to be child murderers. So the narrative that kind of holds these stories together as the film goes on is about the Bello family. Now, if you ask me, I would have rather seen an anthology movie because that's what the books were, kind of like The Twilight Zone or more recently, A Trick or Treat. Because the narrative that tries to hold all of the stories together, it's been said and done numerous times. The child actors are really good, but they're just not given that oomph or that emotion that I was trying to connect with them. Now, when it comes to the creatures and the images that we get from the books onto the screen, that is where the movie absolutely shines, for sure. The reason they're so good is because the director understands where the camera's at in space. It sets up very good tension. For instance, Harold seeing the scarecrow, in the big cornfield. He plays with atmosphere and angles to set up a scare that might not be as scary if it were just a jump scare. Also, the creatures are a combination of practical effects and CGI, which I can absolutely jump on board with. Because if it's done right, you can't see the CGI, just the cool looking practical effect in front of your face that kind of melds and bends with the graphic effect from the computer. And like I said, if it was just an anthology film of just these stories that turn the page, a new story, turn the page, a new story, I think I would have liked this film a lot more than what I did. Even though I was excited in the theater, and yes, there are some pretty cool scares, and the creatures are really, really, really cool, I didn't feel the connective tissue that the narrative was trying to tell me. I most definitely just would have saw a Twilight Zone type of flick. The one thing that I can say about this film is that if you are a young horror enthusiast, like I kind of was back when I was reading the books when I was 13, 14 years old, definitely go check this movie out. Because like I said, the scares are there, the atmosphere is really cool, but the kind of, Losers Club and Stand By Me kind of thing they're trying to put on you doesn't seem forced, but it's just not connected how it should. So If it was an anthology film, I'd go 8.5. But since that story that I don't think needs to be there is in there, I'm going to go a 7.5 balls out of 10 for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It's not a bad film. If you love horror, it's a great jumping off point for young horror enthusiasts, like I said before. So if you like horror, give it a shot. But like I said, 7.5 out of 10 balls. The narrative wasn't there, but the creatures, hell yeah, they were cool. So if you guys like what you heard or love what you see, subscribe, it's free. I always appreciate you hanging with Ball. You guys stay rounded and have a great evening.